if you don't have a winning game system, when the things get tough, when you get to those playoffs, right? And you don't have a winning game system, it doesn't matter if you have the most talented players, you're not going to win the championship. So
welcome to the Inside Scoop for Outside Sales, the show that dives deep with industry leaders to get you actionable insights to help field sales professionals like you grow and achieve more. Here's your host, Trey Gibson.
Hey everybody, this is Trey Gibson, CEO and founder of Spodio, and you're listening to the Inside Scoop on Outside Sales Podcast. We're going to have a great time today. Sebastian from Rilla. Rilla is the leading speech analytics software for outside sales and service. He's multi-talented, not only the founder and CEO of Rilla, but also a stand-up comedian. So I'm a huge fan of Sebastian, and I love the work that him and his team are doing. Today, we have an awesome topic. We're going to talk about how to build a world-class coaching program for field sales teams. Sebastian, welcome.
thank you so much, Trey. Appreciate being here and you guys having us here. We love what you guys do. And so this was bound to happen at some point. So I'm pretty excited.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'll just kick it off. Why should companies even care about having a sales coaching process or program?
In the macroeconomic environment that we're entering into today, not only do you have to make sure that you're growing, but that you're growing profitably. And so if you think about any sales team in general, but especially in outside sales, there's two things that you're doing. You're generating leads and you're trying to convert them into sales, into qualified opportunities, and then into sales. And so generating leads, right? You can generate more leads, you can spend more money. But if you're not converting a lot of those leads, your cost of leads is really high. And then your cost of sales is really high if you don't convert a lot of leads, right? So the one driver that sales coaching really helps you with is not to generate more leads, but to be able to convert more leads, right? To raise that conversion rate at every step of your sales funnel, right? And so if you're growing, very inefficiently by just generating so many leads and converting such a tiny percentage, your cost of leads goes up, right? Which you might be growing, but with the macroeconomic environment that we're going into today, everybody needs to be thinking about, how do I manage my unit economics? How do I manage my profitability? And if you think about it this way, if you have 10 salespeople and they're converting each at 10%, right? It's still going to cost you the same to pay those salespeople, right, for their time and for their effort, right? But if they're converting at 20% or 30%, all of a sudden, all the same 10 salespeople are being 3 times or 2 times as productive, right? So the only way that you can get that conversion rate up is if those salespeople are really well trained and they really know what they're talking about and they really know what they're doing when they're meeting with homeowners, with customers, with whatever prospects they're talking about. They need to be really well trained and well coached. So that's increase your conversion rate. You grow not only you grow your revenue, you grow your profits, you grow your economics. So yeah.
It was funny, being in sales for a lot of my professional career. A lot of times you hear, we need more leads. The leads suck, or we need more leads, whatever it might be. It's all about kind of that top of funnel. And you're right, so often there's this whole pipeline or opportunity there in the middle to do more with what you have. Matter of fact, we're spending time here at Spodio optimizing our middle funnel, right? Making sure that we're squeezing everything that we got. And that's what it sounds like you're talking about, is that coaching is about getting everything. Not always it's about more leads. Of course, you typically need more leads, but get the most out of what you have, which, seems powerful, seems awesome. I'm in. Why are people doing coaching more often? What's going on?
In the previous years, it was easy. It was easy to make sales because, a lot of industries just went berserk, right? Home improvement, right? And you were selling home improvement.
I was shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah.
my God. It was just easy to just anybody, you see companies starting from zero to $10 million in annual revenue in a year or two, right? So it was just easy, right? And now those conversion rates are dropping, right? It's not easy. And so it's we think about at Rilla, we think of sales as a sport, really, And when things get tough, that's when you really need a good system, right? Because it doesn't matter if you have really talented players, right?
Yeah.
And a really good coach, even if you don't have a winning game system, when the things get tough, when you get to those playoffs, right? And you don't have a winning game system, it doesn't matter if you have the most talented players, you're not going to win the championship. So now we're getting into those. Okay, now it's not easy.
Times have changed. Yeah. Well, you're right. And like when I've been through an economic downturn, matter of fact, I owned a home improvement company during the 08-09 downturn. And like, I mean, it changes so fast. And you're right. Like companies out there, whether you're in home improvement or anything, like you have to be on your A game. It's going to get tough. And so just be prepared. So like, where should a company start with coaching? Like, like there's all sorts of the parts of the process that I should look at, but like a good coaching program or process, like where do they start?
It depends on what stage you're at in your company, right? So if you're going from an owner or a salesperson who's like going out there making all my sales, and now I started hiring my first couple of reps, right? And I'm trying to scale myself into them. The trick is just trying to systematize what it is that you're doing. Try to really put it down into a system, because you might know it intuitively, but the people that you're hiring do not. If you're a larger company and you have maybe like 10 to 100 reps and you were relying on the easy microeconomic conditions and you didn't have a really good coaching system set up, it's all about identifying what your top performers are doing, right? Because if you don't even have a coaching system, like let's say you have, really good lead generation system, you have a really good sales pipeline, but you don't have a sales process for when you're talking to a customer or when you're sitting down with somebody. What you're going to want to do is just look at the top performers in your team, right? What it is that they're doing specifically, how they say things, what they say specifically, where in the pipeline do they actually devote most of their time and effort, how do they follow up? You just try to observe them, right? See what they're doing, and then you try to replicate that into a winning game system. It's easier said than done, right? Because you have to be very diligent in observing what it is that they're doing and systematizing it. And then once you create, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just a simple system, right? That just like a simple sales pipeline, a simple coaching system, maybe like a little bit of a script. That's going to be better than nothing, because then from there you can start testing and trying to adopt consistency in your sales teams, right?
Yeah.
And then you can fine tune and iterate from there. So just trying to create a system, ideally from what your top performers are doing.
That makes a lot of sense. So you first you have to know what you're coaching to, right? You can't just go out there and willy-nilly like, hey, try this, try that. Like you have to have a process. Here's our sales process. Here's our playbook, whatever. Here's how we do it here. And then you can start, those are best practices, right? And so then you start coaching towards that and kind of tweaking it along the way.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Absolutely. And just having a plan is better than even a bad plan is better than no plan. Right. Because it at least gives you a benchmark where you say, okay, this plan didn't work, right? And you're going to have it not work all the time. Like what Mike Tyson says, all plans go out the window when you get punched in the face.
Sure.
A customer shuts the door in your face, or, you're in CPG and you try to get it with the owner and they tell you, don't bother us, please. Like, we're busy, right? Like all plans are going to go out the window sometimes, but you can take from those.
Especially when you're face to face, like you go visit that first prospect face to face. It's like, oh, boy, this is awkward,
Oh yeah, it does hit different. Like when you're in a cold call and you get the phone shot in your face, that's okay. That's not that. But if you're like talking to somebody and they're like, get the hell out of my face, that stings a little bit. But again, like with that repeated trial and error, then you can go back to the plan and say, okay, here's the parts of the plan that don't work. Because if you're just doing trial and error without a plan, you can't go back and see what to fix, right? And that's how you're going to develop a killer system. If you guys watch the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, that's exactly how Phil Jackson developed that triangle offense system. He had a system. It took him time, right? Like Michael Jordan didn't win any championships for like the first 5 years of him being in the NBA. It takes time to develop, but eventually you get there. And the companies who get there are the ones that are going to survive and thrive during a recessionary.
Yeah. So, what type of data is typically like useful when doing sales coaching?
So the first thing you want to do, you set up your funnel. Could be a simple funnel that however many steps you need. Could be simple. you're going to want to look at the conversion rate at each step, right? Even if you're not generating a sale, you want to understand why. Okay, this top performer who's generating sales, where is he really good in the funnel, right? Where are they, like, are they really good at the first point of contact where they try to book the appointment, or is everybody booking the appointment and the problem is in the appointment? So you set up your sales funnel, you look at the conversion rates, and then okay, this is the part of the funnel where we have the biggest area of opportunity between our top performers and everybody else, right? And then you try to identify, okay, what is it about this particular part of the funnel, right? When we have the appointment book, maybe we're not closing enough for the follow-up meeting or, for the close, right? Then you start looking at, okay, what is it that my top performers are doing in that particular stage in the process? What is it that they're doing specifically better than everybody else, right? And you try to scientifically get to the core of the problem. And once you find that out, then you can try to figure out the solutions and replicate them with the rest of your team.
Nice. So get those benchmarks from your top performers, and then you measure that. And so, like, let's just say your funnel is, from starting off, you create a new prospect, you have a appointment, you have a presentation, and a close, right? So, like, you would look for that biggest gap based on your top performers and everybody else. Start there. That we can go and start there, and that should make the most flow back down. Okay, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You focus on where the biggest gaps are between your top performers and everybody else, because essentially you can use your top performers as a benchmark for everything, because what they're showing you, right, is that it's possible to do this. Because, in sales, we typically think, oh, top performers are just naturally gifted. They have some magic sauce, right? That they were just born with some natural talent. Essentially, top performers, they're really talented, but they're doing things that they don't even intuitively. They're doing things intuitively that they don't even know that they're doing, that are working really well for that particular sales process. And what you want to do is identify those things, right? And try to replicate it into a sales process, but you have to be really, really diligent about it, right? So if you identify that your top performers have an insane close ratio, if you're door knocking and they're really good at booking appointments with customers from that first door knock, and that's the big gap in the sales process, then you try to identify what the hell is the pitch that they're using to get more customers, right? Yeah. Like we had a customer, right, that had a top performer. This is B2B sales, right? And they were selling to small convenience stores, right? Like small convenience hardware stores, right? And like, like not Home Depot, but like small, medium-sized, hardware stores, right? And they identified that this guy was just so good at booking an appointment with the owner when everybody else would just get the door shut in their face and say like, hey, he's not here. Stop bothering us, please. And when they started looking into it, they noticed that this guy, every time he showed up, he would say like, hey guys, I brought you some coffee. Would you guys care for some coffee? I know it's early in the morning. I don't want to bother you. He would just come in with coffee. And then they were like, oh, then they made that part of their sales system. You know what I mean? And now their appointment rates.
That's awesome.
No, it's just like literally systematizing what it is that those top performers are doing.
Yeah. Well, and like for those companies out there that are just starting up that might not have top performers, there's typically benchmarks available. Like I know when I started Spodio, I had no clue. I've never done SaaS software before. So it was like, okay, so you go out there and look, and like you can find benchmarks typically, or join a professional organization that has other people like you, and then ask them what their kind of benchmarks are. But you're right, like some way or another, you need to find out the target of where you're shooting at for the different steps of your sales process. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a sole owner, then do it. I mean, you've done it yourself ideally, right? And so if you know what your benchmarks are, then you try to get people as close to those benchmarks as possible. That's what I mean by you're trying to systematize what it is that you do specifically. And then you start testing, and you see that people are far away from you, you start looking at where exactly are they far away from me and why.
So let's talk about, like, we're kind of on the data side of it. So what are like the top 3 kind of metrics that maybe you recommend your customers to track, or that you think is important in terms of like having a good coaching program?
So conversion rate's the top one. You also want to look at your cost of sales, like how much money are you spending per lead to get that salesperson to go into that appointment, because that's going to give you a really good idea of where you need to be at to be profitable in your sales process, and which salespeople are being effective with it. Because if you're just looking at end dollar value, right? Oh, this salesperson brought in more money than the rest, but it's because you gave that salesperson more leads.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if there's close rates really low, it could actually mean that your cost per lead for that salesperson is actually higher. So that salesperson is actually not, you might be confusing who the top performer is actually, because
that's right.
Yeah,
He just gets the most leads. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta make sure of the unit economics of every salesperson, that they're actually closing enough, and the cost per lead per salesperson is actually profitable at every stage. And then what I would look at is just the velocity, right? The velocity of the sales process. Like if you have a sales process that typically takes 3 months for some people to close, or it takes a week or two, and you have a person that's able to crunch that down into less than a week, right? Or it's able to do it one time. My God, that is so good. That is so good. And yeah, so you just look at the sales velocity. Who has the top sales velocity in your company? Try to replicate that.
So the beautiful thing that we have about, for kind of what I do and what you do, is we deal with field sales people. All this is easy when you're sitting behind a desk, right? Like, hey, such and such, log how many calls you made today. Great, how many people you talked? It's easy. The frustrating part comes when you send people outside of the office and they're all out there. How the heck did this go on before Rilla? Like, how did people have an effective, how did this even work before what y'all do? It's got to be much more difficult, right?
So yeah, so absolutely. So basically, let's take a simple sales process, right? Let's say you identify with tools like Spotio, right? You're running a door knocking campaign, B2B or B2C, right? And you send reps out there to find customers, right? And to try to knock on doors and get a meeting, right? And you have a really good idea of your results, of your conversion rates, right? And you found a gap, and you say, hey, here, my top performer is converting much higher at that initial step. So I know that he's doing something on that initial approach that the other people are not doing. So now I know that there's a problem on this particular side. In order to go deeper than that, right? The only way to kind of identify what it was that the top performer was doing was just by going on ride-alongs, literally, because
I've done so many ride-alongs. It's awkward as hell.
Yeah. So, I mean, online, online you can look at the recordings of the calls, right? Because you want to identify, if you do a cold call, you can say oh, what's the cold call that's working? Let me look at a few of the examples. When you're outside, you literally have to write and see, and you have to do it. I mean, you have to say, what is it that top performer is doing?
Yeah.
And then try to estimate from the few examples that you can see, try to estimate, okay, I think that what they're doing is this. And then you go with the other non-top performers and you're like, oh, I see the difference. Let me start coaching on that. That's just the first part of the process, identifying what the difference is. Then once you find the difference, you have to make sure that your reps are adopting the new, piece of the puzzle that you want to incorporate.
More ride-alongs.
And then you have to do more ride-alongs. So that means, typically, and this is, based on different industries, typically the average really good sales manager, right? They're going to be spending, because some sales managers don't even get to this part of the process, and some sales coaches don't even, so they don't even know what's going on. So most of the times, people don't even do ride-alongs because it's so time consuming. But if you're a sales manager that actually cares about implementing a good coaching process, typically before tools like Rilla, right? You would have to be spending, if you're a good sales manager, you would have to be spending 24 to 40 hours in a month doing ride-alongs to try to not only identify what your top performers are doing, but try to replicate it with the rest of your team and try to make sure that you're executing it. Because that's the other thing. Yeah. Once you tell people, hey, do this, they're not just going to do it, right? It's like the analogy that we give. It's like, imagine you're Phil Jackson with the Chicago Bulls and you're trying to implement your triangle offense system. Imagine Phil just said in the dressing room, guys, this is the system. This is how we have to do it. We have to create a triangle in the offense, and we have to do it all the time and pass the ball to Michael when it's the game-winning shot. Let's do that. And then Phil Jackson says, be with guys. Go ahead and do that. And then he's not there to see what's actually going on. It's likely that the players are not going to execute it, properly from the very get-go. So you have
and these are the best players in the world.
That's the best players in the world.
Also, these are the most talented. This is the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, and they can't do it. Right? Exactly.
And you have the counterfactual. Michael Jordan did not win any championships in the NBA until they had that winning game system executed perfectly. They did not, right? And you know that it's the system that worked because Phil Jackson took that system and applied it with the Lakers and became the most, I think he's the coach with the most amount of championships in NBA history, right? 11,
for sure. I think for sure, like, because
11, it's 11 titles, like with the Bulls and the Lakers.
Yeah.
So
ridiculous.
So even the best players of all time cannot win without this, winning system. And if you're not there constantly making sure that your players are following that system that you now identified that works, it's just not going to happen, because what you're essentially trying to do as a sales manager, when you identify that this guy is bringing out coffee and trying to like build rapport before he even goes on a sale, right? You're basically trying to tell all your other reps to change their habits, right? And that's one of the hardest things it's one of the hardest things to do with human beings, because habits are so hard to change. And so when you identify what it is that you need to do, then you have to be going on even more ride-alongs to make sure that it's being implemented properly. And so a good sales manager, a modern sales manager who actually cares about implementing good systems so that you can achieve profitability, closing rates, they're going to be spending 24 hours to 40 hours in a month, sometimes 70 hours in a month doing ride-alongs. That means going on a ride-along once a week, right? Twice a week. And I mean, that sounds like a lot, but I mean, if you go on a ride-along for one day with one rep, you're going to see like 2 appointments, 3 appointments, maybe 10 if you're doing burnouts, right? Of actual conversations with customers. It's going to take you like 5 to 6 hours, right? So if you do that 4 weeks in the month, 6 hours a week, that's 24 hours. If you do that 2, you double that, right? If you do that 3 times a week, you're going to be spending like 60 hours,
Forget
70
about
hours just doing ride-alongs to make sure that people, and you have to do it. But the problem is that even when you're spending like 60 hours, you're only able to see like a tiny little percentage of the actual sales conversations. And then, so you're just trying to do this impossible task. It does help, obviously, but it's really difficult to institute this winning game system that you identified just by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We hope you're enjoying the inside scoop on outside sales. If you want to hear more value-packed content, be sure to subscribe and check us out anywhere on social at Spodio. Now back to the show.
So let's go ahead and kick over to like what Rilla does, because I know that y'all obviously make this much easier. So give us a synopsis of like what y'all do and how it helps with this problem.
Rilla is the leading speech analytics software for outside sales and service, right? Speech analytics, what it means is if you have a solar reps, right, who sell residential. If you have roofing reps who sell residential, if you have HVAC reps, residential sales that go into the homeowner's house, right? Or you have CPG sales that go into restaurants and supermarkets to try to, manage your territory, medical sales. You think of the 12 million outside sales and service people in the United States. There's 12 million of those if you count all the industries. They talk to customers face-to-face typically, right? You have to go into a place of business, and there's reasons for why they have to talk face-to-face. You talk face-to-face with homeowners, with customers, and then they record their conversations with the Rilla Voice mobile app, right? Just like this with their phones and tablets, they record their conversations. And then our AI will automatically transcribe, analyze, and give them feedback from all of their sales conversations to try to help them improve their sales. And when Rilla's analyzing all these conversations, it's essentially going to be telling you as a sales coach, as a sales manager, hey, at this part of the process, when we have a really low conversion rate at converting people from initial door knock, initial approach to appointment, here's what the top performer is saying to convert higher, and here's what the rest of are not saying. It would identify this guy's talking about coffee all the time, and for whatever reason,
so keeps coming up. What the hell is coffee with this guy? Yeah.
And then when you talk about coffee, it makes it, like 50% more likely that you're actually going to convert that customer. Try to institute that topic with all of your reps, and then instead of doing ride-alongs to make sure they're doing it, you actually get to see, are we talking about coffee or not?
Wow. So reduces these ride-alongs, and easily establishes best practices.
Yeah. So you go from like having to spend 40 hours in your month to see like maybe like 10, 20 conversations to being able to get data from all of the conversations all the time, anytime, without having to waste your time on ride-alongs.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that story about the coffee. What are some like other things that maybe customer stories you've heard that were surprising, or like, they learned something new? Like, for instance, I remember the first time I heard a good customer story from a Spodio customer. Like he found out all of his reps were like going to a park, next to their office and like drinking Red Bulls for like 4 or 5 hours every day instead of going out and working. And he's like, I lost them as a customer because they let go of their whole team. I was like, man, bummer. And, and he's like, yeah, I'll hit you back whenever we rebuild it. This is like in the early days of Spodio, but like, what are some of the other like ahas that your customers have had that they've learned? Because you just don't know these things, right? Like it's impossible to figure this stuff out.
So we've actually done an analysis on like more than 100,000 sales conversations. This is for residential sales, right?
Oh, wow.
And we saw like what on average, what are the top performers that are closing like 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, $5 million in revenue in a year? What are they saying on average? Typically that's different than everybody else.
Oh, this is good.
And we found 3 things really that are really significant, like in terms of like the statistics. First thing we found, right? And this is like the stupidest thing that makes all the difference. You didn't need all this AI to learn this. You just needed your mom to tell you that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, because the main thing we found was the top performers, they typically talk. We measured this thing called talk ratio. They typically talk 45% to 65% of the time when they're in an appointment. And a door knock is different. When you book an appointment with a customer, you're sitting
like
down.
A presentation,
right? The top performers are typically spending between 45 to 65% of the time talking. Like the distribution is almost like condensed in that range, 45 to 65% of the time, which means that the homeowner is talking almost like 50% of the time on average, right? So it's like a 50-50. Average reps, right, are talking more than 72% of the time, right? And then
really huge difference.
There's huge difference, right? Because if you just like lower the talk ratio from 72 to like the low 60s, we've seen this. Not only that the data, we've actually have customer stories of like one rep saying, "Oh my God, I started in the high 70s, right, in my talk ratio." The low performers, by the way, are higher than 80% when they're doing a presentation. They're just talking. Higher than 80%. Oh, absolutely. Like the low performers. Because
that sounds horrible. Yeah, I'd be sleeping. Yeah,
they're just doing a commercial. They're just like doing an ad. They're not selling. They're just talking.
Hour-long commercial. Forget about it. Yeah,
and there's more, Mrs. Homeowner. Let me show you more.
Yeah.
And so the top, the average reps, we had a rep who literally with Rilla identified his talk ratio was too high. The first month he was like, "Oh my God, let me try to lower that," right? And it's hard to do it, but he was constantly keeping track. Just by lowering his talk ratio, he improved his conversion rate from demo to sale, went from 38% to 57%, a 50% increase. Just by lowering his talk ratio, right? So
do you know how you would do that? Like that's, if I want to, like, is it just have better questions to ask? Like, maybe more open-ended questions, or like there's some coaching opportunity around that, right? It's like,
yes. Just like, that's exactly what he said. He's like, I feel like I just tried to ask more questions, talk less, pause more, and let the customer simmer on what I was saying, and stop every so often. Like, any questions here? Anything clear? What about what I said resonate? Right? Like, just ask more questions, and then they talk more, right? And that's it. And that's the first thing we found.
That's so cool.
It's insane. And second thing we found was typically when you're doing and this is for like presentations, when after you get the initial approach after a door knock, you get a presentation with a customer, you sit down for a long, like an hour or two, maybe, right? We found that typically companies have this thing in their sales process that's called like a company story, right? You tell the customer, the prospect that you're talking to, homeowner or buyer, you tell them something about your company, right? That your company's so good. Here's why you're buying these shingles from me and not all these other,
family owned and operated, been around for 72 years, whatever, that whole thing. Yeah.
We started in 1775. Before my granddaddy was Abraham Lincoln and all that. So they do a company story, right? What we found is, we found 2 things. Top performers on average spend about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes doing the company story, and they don't do it at the beginning of the presentation. They don't do it at the beginning. So the timing, and the average performers, they spent more than 5 minutes doing the company story, right? So like almost like 5 times more, right? And they do it right at the beginning of the presentation. And that's standard, actually. It's super standard.
Yeah, I've
because
seen
they get
a
coached
million
on that.
decks.
You go in, the first thing you do is you tell your company story. Tell them a little bit about yourself. And what the top performers are doing, they're going first. They're doing all like they're talking about the problems. If you do an inspection in a home and you try to like, do a roofing inspection, whatever it is, solar, they talk about pain points first. Then they go into demo. And then once they start talking about price, then they kind of bring the company story later in the conversation, right? Once they've talked about price, so that they can almost use it as a way to handle the objection of price. It's like, oh, why is this so expensive? Well, because you're getting a premium service. This is who we are, right? So that's something that we found that was super interesting. Less time on company story, and the timing is much later.
At the end.
Yeah. And so it's not just like, just cookie cutter. Here's our company story. Let me go later.
That's incredible, because like you're always taught, like at least in a home, like a in-home type sales, you got to build credibility up front, right? Like you got to establish credibility. Here's the company story, and then go. That's actually really interesting. That's contrarian, but it's backed by data, right? Like people don't know this because they're not sitting there. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, it is backed by it. It is contrarian. That's why it's so weird, because the reason you see average reps doing this is because they get trained to do it. So they're just following the sales system, right? They really are. The data suggests the top performers are actually not doing that. They really are not, on average.
All right, hit me with the third. I'm on the edge of my seat. This is good stuff. What's the third?
The third is interactivity. How much back and forth are you generating with your customers? It's another simple thing. If you're generating really high interactivity, like we measure Rilla.
So like lower monologues, like less monologues from both sides and more kind of a conversational.
Yeah, so it's like basically like how many times is the speaker changing per minute? That's how we measure it. But it essentially means like how much back and forth are you generating with that prospect, with that buyer? If there's really high interactivity, so if the speaker's changing a lot of times per minute, this is a really engaging conversation. That person's really engaged with what you're telling them. All the information that you're telling them is likely sticking, because they're not just sitting there like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Granddaddy's Abraham Lincoln. I get it. Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the three things we found. So just to give you the data, top performers, they're higher than 2.5 times on average that the speaker changes per minute, and average reps are lower than 1. So the speaker changes less than 1 time per minute on average in a whole hour long meeting.
Yeah. Wow. What about anything on the B2B side? That have y'all done any, maybe not that deep of analysis, but anything that sticks out that some of the B2B customers are doing that was they uncovered or was unique?
Yeah, setting the agenda and B2B. This is not with as many 100,000 sales conversations, but this is like based on like B2B customers, case studies and testimonials, right? So one of the things that one of our customers found, CPG customer, is that when you go in, and again, this is for the longer presentation, right? When you're sitting down there with the buyer and you're trying to convince them to change payment software, right? Or you're trying to sell, like you're a big brand and you're trying to get into this new supermarket chain or this restaurant, right? And you're trying to sell more products, right? What we found was that if you try to set the agenda first and really early in the conversation, you actually maximize your chances of booking next steps with that customer, right? If you try to set the agenda first and say, what I want to talk to you about today are 3 simple things, ... I want to talk to you about your current payment solution with, I want to talk about some of the pain points that we've identified from our previous conversations. And I want to talk to you about how our software is going to help you with those pain points. Setting the agenda super early on from the beginning of the conversation sets the homeowner sets the prospect in an expectation like, okay, I'm not going to be sitting here for like, it gives them an idea of how long the meeting's going to take. And then you have time, and if they have to get up and leave, you know what I mean? They because they're busy, they know they have an expectation of how much time you're going to give them. That's one of the main things that we saw. Like this particular customer that I'm thinking about, their top performers, we measure like what topics they're using versus everybody else. It was like they were setting the agenda earlier in the conversation at like 80% of the time, and then the average reps were like not even setting the agenda at all. They were just going in and saying like, okay, so setting the agenda, super helpful for B2B.
Wow. God, so interesting. I love it.
And
really cool.
Sorry. And saying in the agenda that you're going to talk about next steps at the end or whatever. And B2B sales, because you typically have more next steps when you're doing a B2B sales and you're trying to get that buyer to and basically saying like, hey, we're going to talk about this today, and then we're going to leave some time at the end to talk about next steps. Sounds fair? And they know like, okay, this is what we're leading up to if this sounds good, right? Talking about some next step.
So kind of final question I have is, let's say that I've got the data, maybe I have my conversion metrics, I have some conversational information as well, like from Rilla, and I have this, what's my next step? What do I do? How often should I be having these coaching type conversations? Is it hey, we have a weekly training? Is it a one-on-one? Like, what are some best practices on how I actually put this in action?
Absolutely. So there's those two things that you said, plus another one that I'm going to say. So you should have obviously like a weekly training to go over general. If you're a sales manager, you manage a team of 5 or 10 or maybe 20 salespeople, you have a weekly training where what you want to do is address the big topics, right? You identified that your conversion rate really drops from that second appointment to like the follow-up meeting. So that's what you need to focus on in all your weekly trainings until you get that gap fixed. Then you move on to the next one. So if you're going to do a weekly training and you identify that in that second meeting, the main problem is the pricing objection, right? Because you can track that with Rilla now. You can track what is the objection that's coming up the most in the conversations that were not successful. Then you know in your weekly meeting, you have to address that particular pricing objection or that particular objection that keeps coming up. And then your weekly prepare for that objection and you come up with some examples of the top performers, how they overcame the objection in successful conversations. That's an amazing weekly meeting. Hey, and you just keep reinforcing that every single week until you get your reps to start overcoming that objection, right?
I like something you said there is really important, and that's reinforcing it. I think, I'm guilty of this, and I know I've seen it others is like they bounce around topics. So this week we're going to talk about this. Next week we're, and so what you're suggesting and makes complete sense is like, you got to put some work in to identify where they really need help, where it's going to make the biggest impact. And you sit on that until you start seeing results.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. You just stick on that because again, you're trying to change people's habits, right? And then what you can't remember short term, you can't remember more than 7 things at a particular time, like a phone number, right? If it's longer than 7 digits, you're not gonna it's really hard to remember a 10-digit phone number, right? So if long term, it's really hard to remember 3 things from like any given. If you're sitting down with that prospect buyer, they're gonna remember 3 things long term that you told them, right?
Yeah.
So same with your sales reps. If you're trying to address all the gaps and all the opportunities, you have all this data and you're going crazy. Oh my God, we need to talk less. And oh my God, we need to generate more. And then we need to talk about and it's like so much that you're going to overwhelm them. They're going to get nothing done.
Yeah.
And that's what typically happens in ride-alongs is that managers give, here's all the things you did wrong, get on it. And then the next time they go out with them a month later, they see that they're doing like 80% of the things wrong. And they're like, what? It's like, no. Focus on the one area that's going to make the biggest impact. If you identify that this meeting is where we need to spend, or if it's our door knock, like we're not generating enough meetings, right? Enough qualified decision makers sit down meetings with them, then spend the most time. How do we make our door knock pitch better? What's the top objection that's coming up in that door knock for why we're not closing more meetings? Who's overcoming that objection? And you stay on that for weeks, and we're going to review it again. Even if you're showing them examples of the same thing, you reinforce it and you reinforce it until you bridge that gap and you start seeing results, right? And you get people now that it's second nature to people, now you can move on to something else. And it typically takes, just to give you an idea, to change a habit, it typically takes a month, right? To change a habit. So just stay on it for at least 4 weeks until you start seeing results. At least.
Dang.
So yeah.
Awesome.
And then
there it is, folks.
And one more thing I want to
What do you got? Yeah.
So one more thing. And so you do your weekly meetings, and I would say the best sales managers that we work with, one of the things that they really do really well is their one-on-one meetings with their sales reps. Because there's things that you have as a team that you can work on. One-on-one meetings with your sales reps, you check their numbers, right? You check their big gaps. You go on a tool like Rilla and you see where they differ the most with the top performers at which particular stage. Boom, you coach on that. Your one-on-ones. That's it.
Yeah. So it's a group and then one-on-ones as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
1,000. Yeah.
Wow. This has been awesome, Sebastian. I've learned a lot, and I know the listeners are going to enjoy the hell out of this. So thank you so much for coming. If people want to find out more about Rilla, get in contact with you and your team, where can they find you at?
Go to rillavoice.com. That's RILLA voice.com, and click on the little book a demo, and you can book a demo with any one of our team members.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Sebastian, your insight. I know it's super helpful. We'll see you around.
Thank you, man.
You've just listened to the Inside Scoop on Outside Sales Podcast with your host, Trey Gibson. Please feel free to leave us a review and subscribe to our channel so you can catch our next episode. Thank you for listening.